A very good morning. So let me just open today's sequence before I start with the revision and take you to Spring Framework. Tell me, yesterday, it was a bit hectic. So have you tried? Was that what I was showing you towards the in the lab session today, towards the end of it? Has everyone tried the integration of a web application with Maven and Hibernate? At least, I'm not saying the complete thing, but at least the login part, authentication part. Can I have a feedback? How many of you have not yet tried? I'm asking you a clear cut question. Who has not yet tried the user authentication part with web application, Maven, and Hibernate? Tell me openly, because that's a feedback for me. Who has not yet tried or not yet succeeded? Or okay, fine. Not yet succeeded is fine, but not yet tried. So does it mean that everyone has tried it? Not tried. Okay. So I'm just counting. So today also, okay, not succeeded Akshay is fine. Not a problem at all. But not yet tried is can be a problem. Okay, guys. So some of you have responded. I'm sure the number is much more. Yeah. So today lab, partly you are going to do Spring and partly we are going to continue with the same case study with CMS. So at that time, whatever problems, whatever issues you are facing, let me know. Did anyone check? Yesterday night, I guess. Yeah, yesterday night, I had uploaded a small README and given you the little better version. Better version means tutorial down, I tutorial down I had added. So that part we will, what do you say, continue with in the lab session. So today morning, I don't want to invest any time in that because we have to get started with full-fledged Spring programming today onwards. So let's start with a little bit of revision of what I said in Spring. So you need to answer, people ask you why you have used Spring as a technology, as a project technology. So there are 10 different answers. So it simplifies Java programming. To what level that you have yet to see. But right now, just keep it in this, in the back of your mind. You are going to end up writing a simpler code than what you have been writing. Reduces boilerplate code, repetitive code. As I've been telling you, the Hibernate based layer, which you are using earlier, which we have been using now, is going to be greatly reduced by tomorrow evening. You will see Spring being a framework, it gives you ready-made implementation of so many design patterns. So one of them is MVC, Model View Controller, Proxy, Singleton, Factory, ORM. So many ready-made implementations you'll see. Spring tells you that, do you want to integrate it with web technology, servlet based? You just come to me, that is to Spring, and Spring gives you out of the shell, ready-made implementation of Spring MVC using servlets. You want to integrate with database using ORM such as Hibernate. Spring gives you ready-made tools, not tools, but yes, ready-made annotations and the APIs to make the integration easier. And like I said yesterday, the main important thing which Spring brings you, once you start developing a ladder means, layers, basically in the enterprise application using Spring, will there be a tight coupling between the components such as dependents and dependencies, or will there be a totally loose coupling? Answer is, it will be entire layers will be loosely coupled. Okay. And how we are going to manage it, rather how Spring Container manages this loose coupling. So what you are going to study today, or you are going to start learning today, is the Spring Core Container. And once you settle, maybe in the third or fourth day sometime, I'll also introduce you to aspect-oriented programming. So these are the few reasons why you are learning Spring. So what is it? Is it a container, framework, both or neither? Answer is, it is both. So how does it act like, or why it is called as why we are treating Spring as a container? Like I told you yesterday, we had a web container, rather we have a web container. Spring container does not replace a web container. You will see tomorrow when I take you to MVC, a Spring container is going to be an additional layer on the top of your web container. So the things which are web container managing, Spring container says go ahead and you manage it. Rest of the stuff I'll manage types. So coming back to the point, what is it? Why it is called as a container? Because who is going to manage the life cycle of Spring components as the Spring Beans? Answer is Spring container. So the question is, what exactly is a Spring Bean? Like how we have studied Java Bean managed by the web container, combination of JSP and a web container, you will learn today. Spring Bean is the heart of a Spring framework. So Spring Beans are nothing but the Java objects, and those Java objects will have a predefined lifecycle. And who's going to manage the lifecycle of a Spring Bean? Obviously, Spring container. Okay, and why it is regarded as a framework? Because it is going to give you quite extensive but modular. Modular means you choose which module you want to learn. So today our mainly focus is going to be on understanding the Spring core module. If you remember yesterday's diagram, Spring has loads of modules. It has a it has a core module, it has a testing module, it has a AOP module, it has a web module, data integration module. So today being the first day, we are just going to go get introduced to Spring core container. Today's day is excellent for understanding the internals about Spring and very good for answering popular questions. Okay, so now the terms. Okay, before I show you the terms, let me give you some idea, because otherwise, you might be wondering what loose coupling, what layers, what is she talking about? So, there is a diagram here. Are you going to understand it fully? Not really, because this is the first day. But over time, you'll understand it. More than understanding, you'll be implementing it in our applications, in our projects. So just a second. Okay. This is my favorite diagram in the sense, favorite in the sense, people get a lot of clarity after this. So I'll share this with you. Today you don't require. Tomorrow when I start with Spring MVC, definitely I'll share. So right now I'm saying, okay, read the title. What is the title here? The left-hand side is your JSP Java Bean. You can add the servlet also to the mix. In short, servlet JSP Java Bean layers. Versus on the right hand side, you got Spring MVC layers. So forget Spring. At least tell me whether you are comfortable here. So if you develop a web application with Maven, of course, this is Hibernate at the back end. So you bring in Maven dependencies, Hibernate jars, dependency jars. We configure Hibernate configuration XML. And what is the job of Hibernate utils? Tell me. Or okay, I'll rephrase the question. Who is dependent upon Hibernate utils for what? Answer my W questions. Who is the dependent on Hibernate utils and for what? I hope you are answering. You understood the question? Who is dependent on this? Let me see what you are answering. Hibernate DAO on Hibernate utils, yes. But for what? For getting the singleton, immutable, inherently thread safe, heavyweight because it takes time, the section factory, this thing. So here is the dependent and dependency. So answer the next question. So listen, this is what you are now used to. Okay, so focus here. So tell me, is this session factory automatically given, automatically supplied to the DAO layer, or do you have to explicitly call the method get factory? Automatically supplied A, call the method. You have to call the method. Every DAO layer method, first thing we do is session Hibernate session is equal to get factory dot get session. I'm sorry, get factory and then get current session. So here are the dependencies. Okay, what is a dependent object and what is its dependency? DAO dependent on utils. So is somebody providing the dependencies directly, or are you accessing the dependencies yourself? You are accessing it. Got it? Okay, continue. So then of course we have web.xml. And these layers, I hope now you know by heart, inside out. Database, reflected by ORM using POJOs, POJOs used by DAO layer, Java Bean, and then the topmost layer can be either servlet or a JSP. Currently, you know JSP managing Java Bean. When I give you a ready-made demo of a servlet, I mean full MVC using servlet JSP Java Bean, you will see that servlet will manage the Java Bean and JSP will be used for presentation logic. So now focus on these two things. Between Java Bean and a DAO, which is the dependent object and what is a dependency? NT dependent, CY dependency. Take short forms and answer. Java B is a dependent object. And what is its dependency, guys? Which is its dependency? You know, obviously, the DAO layer is a dependency. You got me? So now recall, what is it we write in a Java Bean constructor? What is it that we do in the Java Bean constructor? You have written at least one Java Bean by now. So tell me, we create the instance of either, earlier we used to create JDBC based DAO layer. Now we create Hibernate based DAO layer, right? So who is creating the dependency? Tell me, a dependent object like a bean or a third-party container like a web container or whatever? Answer is dependent object. Are you understanding? So here, this is called as the traditional approach. What is traditional about it? Bean is dependent on the DAO. So Bean is creating dependent object, is creating its dependency. Story over. But not so fast. Because tomorrow, if the nature of the dependency changes, did we have to change yesterday a bean? Or could we use the bean, same bean as we had written for JDBC? Answer is no. We had to make certain changes. So that is why I'm saying there is a tight coupling between a dependent and dependency. Likewise, tight coupling between DAO and a dependency utils. Understood why I'm calling it as a tight coupling? Okay. And tight coupling is never desirable because, like I said, currently there's a one being dependent on the DAO. What if there are 10 dependent objects sharing the common dependency and the nature of the dependency changes? All the dependent objects get affected. So in your larger project, end of module project, what will you go for? What will you prefer? Tight coupling between the layers or loose coupling between the layers? Of course, loose coupling. Everyone understands me? Now the next question. So, okay, let me say this. So this was an approach you are used to till today, till Spring enters the picture. So what is that approach? A traditional approach, conventional approach of programming, where dependent objects are managing the dependencies. But so, okay, let me say this. So who is the control of dependency is with whom? Is it with dependent objects or is it with third-party containers? Obvious questions I'm asking you. Of course, the answer is the control of dependency, of managing the dependency of that control lies with dependent objects. All agreed? All understood the statement? So now there is an opposite term which is called as IOC. So what is IOC? Inversion of control. So what is that inversion of control? I promised you this statement I'll be uttering like 10 times a day or maybe 50 times a day. Instead of dependent objects managing their dependency. Instead of dependent objects getting or managing their dependencies, you are delegating the control to a third-party container. So which is the third-party container we will have today onwards? Spring container. So who will be managing the dependencies for us? Dependent objects or a Spring container? SC, hereafter called as WC web container, SC Spring container. Of course, Spring container. So people ask you, what is inversion? Why it is called IOC? Because the control of managing the dependency is no longer with the dependent object. It is given to the third-party container. And then comes the term dependency injection. So instead of Java Bean, instead of dependent object creating the dependency, who will create the dependency for us now onwards? Spring container. And just creating means what? Creating the object is not sufficient. It will make the dependency available to the dependent object when at compile time, class loading time, or at the runtime. Answer is at the runtime. So making the dependencies automatically available to the dependent objects by the third party container is nothing but your DI. DI is standing for dependency injection. Okay, so that is what you are going to first understand. So I always start the freshers like you without Spring. Okay, I will show you the disadvantages of not using the Spring container, and then we will enter the Spring, and then you'll understand everything. So guys, what is it going to be developed? Are we going to develop this today? Impossible. This is a, day by day approach. But looking at the end picture always helps you, always, prepares you mentally. So take a look at it. Like I said, please don't feel bad that, okay, I'm not understanding what is it controller, what is it service. Don't worry. Give me 2 more days and you will understand it inside out. So now I'm just comparing it with what is going to start tomorrow onwards. Today is just a core container. Today we are not entering web applications with Spring. Tomorrow onwards, only web applications. I mean, then we will not come back to core Java applications. So now I have given you, you remember, a new pom.xml file. What is new about it? In addition to Hibernate jars, there are Spring jars also. Okay, so there are some configuration files. We will do that. So forget that. Okay, let me just say a word. So see, next 2-3 days, okay, 2 or 3, let's see, I mean, I can't really count and tell you, 2.5 days at least, we will be working in Spring Framework, but without Spring Boot. So when I take you from Spring Framework to Spring Boot, it is like climbing ladders. So the below steps are the same. You have a web container. On the top, you have a Spring container, and on that, we will be installing Spring Boot framework. So ahead of time, I'm telling you, when we enter finally Spring Boot, which layers, which part will be reduced to 0, this configuration reduces to 0. And I'm sure you must be like, see, I'm doing the major work for you, giving you the pom.xml, but still people are managing it. I mean, finding it difficult and all. So all this will go away. We'll talk about it. And this is what is the contribution of Spring Boot, reducing the configuration to 0. Everything is automatically done. Okay, but these layers where the actual code is, for example, POJOs, DAO, service, controllers, we will have to still write. Okay, so right, that I will explain on the Spring Boot day. So now understand what is it we are going to build. So client will be sending, it is all HTTP client, web browser. Client will be sending a request to the Spring framework. It is a Spring MVC framework. Spring MVC framework will give the request to the controller. This is your request handling controller. So this is also called as a presentation logic, because this is what is going to interact for the request handling purpose. So you will see, you will be learning tons of annotations, and you will see the annotation makes your code so compact. So here, what will be the job of this controller? I've given already request handling, handling the request. But will you end up writing, do you want to mix up the business logic in the request handling part, or want to separate it? Separation is the key to success. Separation of concerns. So request handling controller is simply going to call the business logic method of the service layer. Okay, so you'll see their Java Bean, which you are writing today, Java Bean has a business logic methods. So that will be replaced by your service. Are you understanding my comparison? Here is the Java Bean, here is your service layer. Okay, but service layer, will it contain what is it? This thing, business logic or data access logic also? Of course, data access logic is separate. So you are like how Java Bean today is calling the DAO layer method. Who will be calling whose method? Service layer will be calling the DAO layer method. And DAO layer will of course hit the database using JPQLs, your session.save, session.pers, whatever. I mean the JPQLs or those session APIs or JPA APIs and all that will get the result. And this layer I have been telling you, that is where I have given you maximum focus. The Hibernate managed POJOs fall into two categories. Which two categories? Either you have standalone entities having the annotation at entity at ID, or you have dependent embedded objects, nothing but embeddables, right? Entity type and a value type. So this layer is zero change. Okay. So now coming back to the point, let's see whether you can answer it. Who is, okay, let me ask you, between controller and service, can you tell me NT and CY as in who is dependent on whom? Who is going to call whose method? Is that dependent? So between controller and service, which is the dependent object and what is the dependency? Absolutely correct. So, sorry, this is not yet. So who is going to call whose method? Just now I told you the data flow will be controller calling the service layer method. Now, do we want to use tight coupling between the layers or loose coupling? Of course, loose coupling. So think a little bit of ahead. So in the controller's constructor, the REST controller is just a next step, REST APIs. So anyway, so in the constructor of this layer, do you expect us to create the service layer instance? Meaning, do you want dependent object to create the dependency? Yes or no? Of course, no. Do we want a traditional, conventional model, or do you want a IOC as an inversion of control? Of course, we want IOC. So the same term, instead of controller managing the dependency, who is our latest intelligent slave? Spring container. So you just tell the Spring container, I means controller wants the dependency as a service layer. And what are the different ways where you can give the instructions to your slave, be it web container, be it Spring container, be it Hibernate, either using XML or annotation. XML is an ancient approach, nobody uses. So by the end of today, you will learn a very powerful annotation at the rate auto wired. See the see the word auto wiring, automatic wiring. So what is wiring? Wiring is nothing but injection of dependencies into dependent object. If you're still struggling with the word injection is equal to, dependency injection is equal to making the dependencies available to dependent objects via third-party container. So guys, your so much of code is going to reduce and so much of, not so much, complete loose coupling you are going to see. So here in controller, tomorrow sometime, because today we are just going to do the core business. So tomorrow by the similar time, I hope you will be adding one single auto-wired annotation. And will you be passing the service layer interface or implementation class? So you know the age-old principle. Can one interface be implemented by multiple implementation classes? Core Java, quick answer. Of course, yes. So here, Spring recommends you, encourages you to use the interface-based pattern. And that is the reason, guys, all this while we were using DAO interfaces and all. So in short, what will you inject in the controller? Service layer implementation class or service layer interface? Of course, service layer interface. So that tomorrow, even if the service layer changes, will your dependent object get affected? Absolutely not. Spring container will create the modified service implementation class, and that instance will be injected via the interface. Age-old principles, upcasting, Interface reference can directly refer to any implementation classes. Likewise, in the service layer, now I'm going a little faster. Service layer, what is the dependency of the service layer? Tell me. Which is the dependency of this DAO. So are we going to create a DAO layer instance in the service? Never. Absolutely never. Instead, who is going to supply you? Is it a traditional control where the dependents are managing the dependencies, or is it a IOC? Of course, it is a IOC. So instead of dependent objects managing the dependency will be injected. And trust me, guys, one annotation at AutoWire. And if you are using Spring 5.3, 4 onwards, even that goes away. I mean, all that is a detail which I'll cover. Now, the best one. Here, have I drawn anywhere Hibernate utils layer? Answer is no. Is it that I have forgotten to draw? Of course not. So see, what was the job of the Hibernate utils earlier? I mean, till today, to provide the dependency, to provide the session factory to the DAO layer. Again, traditional approach, conventional programming, or IOC. So in a DAO layer, which we will develop tomorrow sometime, which is your Spring Hibernate, the best integration, most powerful integration, Spring MVC at the front end and the this thing, Hibernate at the back end. I'm not talking about full stack. Full stack is a little later. So just monolithic application, but all these layers. So coming back to the point, do you have to create your Hibernate utils? And does the DAO layer have to call get factory or get session factory kind of getters? Absolutely not. Instead of dependent object, same statement I'm saying for the 10th time already, I guess. Instead of dependent object managing their dependencies, you just tell your slave, you just tell Spring Container, DAO layer, as a DAO layer, I need a session factory. Are you understanding me? And this session factory, just AutoWire, one annotation. So your Spring Container will search. Of course, it is not like a, what do you say, immediate automatic. All this will happen automatically, but with Spring Boot. So we will configure something called as database property file. Spring Container will look into this database property file, and there's something called as Hibernate configuration files, Hibernate persistence and all that. And who is going to create this singleton immutable thread safe session factory? Programmer in Hibernate utils type of layer or Spring Container, PRSC Spring Container. And just creating session factory is not stopped. I mean, is not done. It is not the only thing. It will make it available when you demand. Pojo is not a dependency of any layer. So Pojos will be even when we enter Spring. Which layers will be managed by the Spring container, controller, service, and the DAO layer. But who will keep on managing the Pojos lifecycle, transient, persistent, detached, and removed, 100% Hibernate. So when I say Hibernate, what I mean is JPA, implementer Hibernate. Later, you can change it to any implementer. So guys, this is what is our aim. And once I see you comfortable in Spring MVC, I'm going to introduce Spring MVC, but with Spring Boot. So you'll get comfortable in a day or half in Spring Boot. And then finally, I'll take you to, only thing is that controller will be replaced by something called as REST controller, where we finally start talking about a front end and a back end. So I'll give you a React front end ready-made, and we will invest time in developing a back end. So that is the plan for next few days. So forget the rest of the plan, but at least do you understand the loose coupling between the layers? Nothing but inversion of control. Got some idea about what we are going to develop over the time? Okay, great. That's just a comparison part of it. So coming back to today, since this is all future, but I mean, it depends on today. Today is a very important day in understanding the foundation. So what is inversion of control or IOC? It is a software style. It's a style of programming. So you read this already. I've explained. Just a second. Read this much slowly and tell me whether you understood with a diagram especially. Understood what I have written as a summary of whatever I've said for last half an hour. Got something out of it? 10%, 20% at least? I hope it is more than that. So there's another catchphrase for explaining the same concept of DI. It is called as Hollywood principle. You can Google it. So what does that Hollywood principle says? You don't call us, we will call you. A famous catchphrase. And I personally like it because it explains things to a fresher. So what does it mean? Of course, Hollywood, it's all glamour world and all that. Hollywood, Bollywood, Tollywood, whatever you call it. So the point is just a story, small story. Suppose you are a aspiring, struggling actor, actress, model, or whatever. So then, and you have given some audition test, story behind the statement. And so you are keenly waiting for the results. You can think of yourself as candidates, recruiting this, and you have given the interviews and you are looking for the results. You can always relate to that. So coming back to the point, you being in a, what do you say, anxious position, you keep calling them, you keep bugging them. And finally, the recruiter or the whatever, the whoever is looking after recruitment gets bugged and says, okay, you don't call us, we will call you. Okay, so this is the story behind. So when you relate it to our software world, what is Spring Container telling the dependent objects? You don't manage the dependencies hereafter. We will manage the dependencies for you. Understanding the story, understood the relation, understood the connection between what it is. I find it very easy. I mean, every batch, like fresher batch, when I'm talking about, they appreciate it because they connect to it. Okay, so this is what your Spring is going to do for us. So as usual, we start with, generally I start with a simple basic scenario to understand why Spring is so important or what Spring actually does to our whatever programming model. And then we will enter the Spring and then we will do the whole things. So all these I had shared the before. So open day 12 data. Open day 12 data, day 12 help, Spring help. And open diagrams. There is one diagram called as Y Spring. Found it? Day 12 data, that is Saturday data. What is it? Day 12 help, Spring help, and the diagrams you will get a Y Spring. So what is the idea? We will create a project. Of course, when I say without Spring, we will not add the actual Spring container and the XML, configuration and all that. We will identify the disadvantage and then we will enter the Spring. Okay, so the reference scenario, this is the typical scenario I take for beginners. So think of a simple ATM machine, simple ATM scenario. So here we are talking about ATM as a interface. This Spring promotes, later you'll see, and anyway, for loose coupling interface and implementation class. So there is a clear-cut separation between what is to be done, specification versus implementation. We have been saying this all over Java life. Okay, so imagine there are methods, withdraw and deposit. So what will this interface contain? Specification, implementation, both or neither? Obvious question. Only specification. Everyone gets it. But specification alone, sufficient or insufficient? 100% insufficient. So we will end up, I'm going to give you this as a ready-made code. Don't worry. So you will have a ATM implementation. Please do not expect, we are not into full-fledged programming yet. The whole idea is to show you that loose coupling, tight coupling, advantages, disadvantages, etc. Okay, so this will be like a SOP. In withdraw, in deposit, that kind of logic, dummy logic. Okay, so coming back to the point, ATM implementer will implement these methods. Okay, but now there is a catch, not a catch, but okay, there is a requirement, business requirement. So what is that business requirement? The business requirement is the moment your client means bank customer, who else? The customer performs a withdraw or deposit, you have to send a notification, you have to alert, you have to send a message to the underlying bank that this and this transaction has taken place. Understood what I said? It's not a difficult statement at all. Tell me, clear or not clear? Clear? Okay. So now here, do you want to tightly couple the transferring logic? I mean, transferring is wrong word. Sending notification logic? We don't. So come to another layer, a transport layer. So this transport layer, what is the job of this transport layer? Inform the backend, inform the underlying bank that such and such transaction has taken place. Again, an interface. So transport interface, you have the method, something like inform bank, communicate with the bank, and the raw data transfer. I mean, raw data format is a binary, so I've just taken a binary example. But can one interface have multiple implementation classes? 100% yes. So if your team, programmers team, is not ready with the actual transport layers, this is a mock transport. Mock means dummy. Okay, test transport. All SOPs you are going to see. HTTP transport and the SOAP transport. So SOAP is Simple Object Access Protocol, a web services related protocol, which today hardly people use. All SOAP implementations are transferred to REST. So I'll tell you SOAP versus REST when we enter the REST APIs. Okay, so that's later. So here, now tell me, listen to the important question. This is where you start participating. Between ATM implementation and transport, who is going to call whose method for which purpose? 3W questions. I'll repeat the question. Between ATM implementer and the transport layer, who is going to call whose APIs, whose methods for which purpose? Tell me. You can write in short form. I understand short form most of the times. Transport is calling the ATM implementation. Transport is using ATM this thing. Swapnil, Shubham, wake up. Guys, just now I said, are you not reading the diagram? Where are your reading skills? I said, who has to inform whom? The transport layer has to inform an ATM implementer, or ATM implementer has to use the transport layer. Come on, guys, this is a disappointing thing. ATM implementer in withdraw and deposit method, we are going to call the transport layers communicate with bank method. So who is going to call whose method? The ATM implementer, that is withdraw deposit functionality, the business logic functionality is going to depend upon the transport layer. So which is the dependent object and what is its dependency? It is all about dependent and dependencies. ATM is a dependent object. And what is the dependency? Who is its dependency? Transport layer is the dependency. Everyone is clear? So at least figure out the basics. Okay, so keep this with you. And we will not enter the Spring. I mean, we'll have the Spring jars and all, that's not an issue, but we will not actually bring in the Spring container. So let us see the disadvantages without Spring. And then of course, we are going to enter Spring and stay there the whole week. Okay, so now the instructions. Go to D12 help, Spring help. Can you see a folder here, ready code? There are two code packages, two folders. One is dependency, one is dependent. Copy them. Actually, I'm just thinking, okay, copy. I was just thinking what will be the best way. So copy that, come to the ID. Okay, by the way, today we are not going to write, unlike yesterday, huge code. In lab session, I'll get it done. Of course, we have to continue with that CMS case study. But theory session is all about understanding Spring. So I am encouraging more and more people to write along with me. Okay, because then you can run it and you can understand the Spring Bean life cycle, Spring container, Spring wiring, automatic wiring so easily. Okay, so now here the next instruction. Wait a second. Does everyone have day 13 Spring Java SE? So what it has, see, the names may not be understandable. Open the pom.xml and you should see it has this is what I'm going to use later for web application also. It will have Spring Framework dependencies as well as Hibernate Framework dependencies. In short, everyone has it. So we never made use of it. So let us refactor it to day 14 and continue with that. So your efforts of startup will reduce. I'm giving you the instructions in a very slow manner. Right click on day 13. There's a refactor option, rename, and simply call it as day 14 because there's no point in making unnecessary copies and, increasing the disk space. I mean, wasting the disk space, I meant. So has everyone refactored? Today's day 14, right? Yeah, date 14. Yesterday we wrote something. Yeah, today's day 14. I just checking. So has everyone refactored it, guys? Day 13 to day 14. Very, very easy instructions I'm giving. Open pom.xml. It doesn't automatically rename everything. So just pick up this name, say Control F, say Control V. Didn't work. So, okay. So Control C and Control V. And just change day 13 to day 14. Replace goal globally. You know this, find or replace. And say replace all, close. So the Spring version, before Spring Boot I'm using is 5.3.16 and Hibernate version, even we will end up later using 5.6.3 or something. This is fine because all your jars are already downloaded. I don't want you to waste time in any Maven dependencies downloading today. Save it. And what do you do immediately after saving? After making any changes in pom.xml, what should be the next step I should do? Update. Force update is the easy way out. So right click on it, Maven, update the project. And you can see here, if you don't want to take any chances, force update. And it should not take you more than a half a minute or a couple of seconds because your dependencies, now Spring and Hibernate dependencies, are already downloaded from Maven Central Repo to your Maven local repo. So how do you check this? So you have Java SE11, which is what we are using from day 1. And all these dependencies are available in your M2 repository. All good so far? Everyone reached here? Can I continue? Okay. So now you have copied those two packages, dependent and dependency, paste them under src main Java. Oh, this didn't work. I mean, okay. So I'm just deleting this snippet. I'll have to copy it again. I must have copied something else in the meantime. Okay, so copy the packages again and paste it under src main Java and open the dependency first. You tell me when you have done the copy, so I'll start explaining the code, which I've already explained with the diagram. I mean, code I've not displayed, the overall. Can I? Okay, open dependency please and open the dependency interface. Purposefully keeping it all very simple. Okay, so I have given you the basic code and we will be playing with the code throughout the day to make you understand all Spring basics. Treat today as an important day from your exam, interview point of view, all foundations. Okay. So the transport, it is having one method, inform back. So who is going to inform what? Your ATM is just a facade, front end, right? So that is going to inform the underlying back, that is back end, that such and such transaction took place and the data of the transaction is all binary. Okay, step 1. Now, interfaces alone are useless. I mean, not useless, insufficient, I should say. So there are 3 implementation classes, nothing but flavors, different types of dependencies. Okay, so open the test transport. I told you Please don't expect any real logic. This is all dummy. We will be adding real logic over days tomorrow onwards. So what are we looking at? Implementation class, a default constructor. Everyone knows when I say get class dot get name, it returns you the fully qualified class name. So what will be the fully qualified class name? Answer here, dependency dot test transport. And what is it I'm doing? Am I really calling some logic or doing anything? Absolutely nothing. I told you it is all SOP. Informing the bank using what will be the output here? Just now I told you dependency dot test transport layer. Understood this class completely? It's a two-liner code. Understood or not? Because later if you tell me explain test transport again, that becomes really bad. So there's nothing. Okay. So what I've done is I have just made 2 more copies. Okay. So if you check your HTTP transport, it's not doing anything separate. I told you it's just a copy. So what will be the anytime our ATM decides to use the HTTP transport, what will be the output? Informing the bank using the HTTP layer. And later you will see this is your web service protocol informing the bank, underlying bank using the SOAP layer. So let me ask you, are you clear with the dependency code? Fully clear? Okay. Now, more interesting is going to be, of course, dependent. So who is dependent upon whom? People gave me exactly opposite answer, wrong answer. Guys, ATM is dependent on transport, not vice versa. When I say dependent, you have to understand who is going to need whose. So for example, I'm just thinking, suppose a user wants to use the printing service. So user is dependent upon that printing service, not the vice versa. Okay, so open the dependent layer, please, and look at the simplest ATM interface. So you'll be wondering where is the account number and all. Guys, this is all dummy. This is all to explain loose coupling versus tight coupling, IOC, basically inversion of control. Okay, so this is it. Now, of course, somebody has to implement it. So here, you spend a minute looking at it and then we'll discuss it. Open, you can say Control-Shift-O maybe. And you just go through the code. It's not more than 10 lines or something. Important lines, I mean. Because I'm going to ask you questions. Let's start discussing it line by line. Age-old question. Who is dependent upon whom? ATM is dependent on the transport layer. Okay. So let us say my HTTP transport and the, what is that other thing? SOAP transport is not ready. So which is the line number where I'm declaring the dependency? Give me the line number where I'm declaring the dependency. Let's have a complete idea. Line number 7. Got it? Okay. This is your dependent objects constructor. This is your so-called business logic method. I told you, don't expect any logic, just a dummy one. So I'm giving you a message, depositing whatever amount. What is this method? This is your string. Anything concatenated to a string is a string. And just take a cursor here. Get bytes is a converter, string to binary. Okay, that's it. So don't go wasting time in what is it and all that. It's just a string to binary converter. And then who is calling whose method for which purpose? Write it down if you want. Your dependent object is calling the method of dependency. For which purpose? For informing the underlying bank. Got it? So this is where who is a dependent object is using the dependency. Is calling, is using whatever. Are we completely clear? This is where I think you should understand completely the dependent and dependency. Are we clear or not? Those who were earlier confused and giving me wrong answers, are they clear? 100%? Great. Same thing. I've just copy pasted the deposit into withdraw. Only thing is I said depositing replaced by withdrawing, getting the binary array of whatever information and informing the bank. So exactly same thing is happening here as well. So the same thing is happening here. Are we all good so far? Okay. So in a minute, we are going to write a tester. I am not giving you the tester. Tester in just 1 minute. So in the tester, main method, all core Java today. Tomorrow we'll enter WebMVC and all. So in that, whatever, in that tester, what is it we are going to create, or what is it I'm going to create? V is the ATM instance, and in that, after I create the ATM instance, I'm going to call a method, maybe either one, deposit or withdraw. So the question is, what will happen? Okay, think about it. In the meantime, let us add a tester. So go to src main Java. Oh, by the way, change this thing. If you are on in the web perspective, Java EE perspective, you can change the perspective to Java, so that all the shortcuts will start coming together to this. And here, write the tester. If you're saying almost understanding, it is a sad thing, because there's nothing complex. This is like a first week core Java code when we learned the interfaces and implementation classes. So if it is hard for understanding, then there's a worry. Step up, guys. So here, test ATM. Of course, a main-based application. Okay. And here, see that. Do we have a Spring container here to manage our dependents and dependencies? Not yet. I said not yet. So who has to create the dependent objects? Us as the programmer. So create the dependent object. Which is the dependent object? ATM implementation. So I'm creating a ATM implementation instance here. New ATM implementation. And if I call, this was the question, but nobody answered, ATM dot deposit, let's say 1000. Now at least answer. When I run it, you're not allowed to run it. So what will happen? Yes, please. Don't run it and spoil the whatever fun. When I run this, what will happen? Quick question. This is a core Java week 1, where I introduced you to interfaces, implementation classes, and all that. Guys, output or exception? It's not such a big deal. I am definitely expecting answers here. No clue? Sad. I'm telling you, disappointing. So here, call the constructor, goes to this. And then here, tester calls here, go follow the flow. It's a two-liner. So you will definitely see depositing the amount. You'll definitely see the conversion. But the moment it comes to my transport.inform bank, what is the value of my transport, guys, here? Null or not null? You're saying output? Even sadder. Of course, null. And when you try to call any method with a null, what is it you are going to get, guys? So why you are not understanding this? We are now almost to the end of Java and you are not getting it, which is really disappointing. I'm being blunt. I know I'm being harsh, but you have to step up. Okay. You should immediately identify people identify in the beginners batches. So because we have not initialized, that whole idea is about managing the dependency, right? So run this, and here you'll definitely see our famous null pointer. The moment I try to deposit the funds, you get a NPE. And where do you get it? In the line where you are trying to use the dependency. Is everyone 100% clear so far? Okay. So now, because see, listen to this. I am okay. I can understand that a huge Hibernate Web Maven project you are not able to. So that is accepted. There is no hard feelings from my side. But if you don't understand this, it really gives me a kind of a shock that people are not getting it. So guys, please focus more. Okay, going ahead. So everyone understands it. And why this is? So let me ask you a question. Are the dependencies made available to the dependent object or not yet? Are the dependencies supplied, injected, made available to dependent object or not yet? Answer is 100% not yet. Otherwise, I would have got it. So, do we have a Spring like a container to do the job for us? Not yet. So, but I can always create my own dependency. I told you guys, I started you on a note. Let us find out the disadvantages and then enter Spring. So, anyone wants to give the right hand side. You can do it in the constructor also, but I'm just doing it in here. Yes, please. What is the RHS? I don't want a null pointer. So type the RHS. Simple. What should I do on the RHS to avoid the null pointer? Create the object. What else? So here, new transport. You got me? And now, when you run again, what do you expect to see? Zero null pointer exception. So this is your, which object is getting created? The dependency object test layer is getting injected. It is calling the ATM implementer. I'm just printing the dependency value. It is not null. So we are getting that dependency properly. And here while depositing 1000, is dependent object getting any exception? No. Dependencies are made available, but by the programmer, not automatically. And are we using the test layer to inform the underlying bag? Are you getting the same output in short? It's a two-liner. Everyone clear? So answer my next question. So far, who is creating dependent object? Who is creating dependencies? And who is wiring? Wiring means injecting, making the dependencies available to dependent objects. Who is doing the wiring? All answers are programmer. So if you want to replace that answer by the container, then only you will get a loose coupling and all. So I'm still not in Spring. So continue the story. So the story goes like this. Here, open the dependent object. I'm purposefully using the terms so everyone gets ready. Everyone becomes, what do you say, comfortable by the end of the day. So open the dependent object. And now I'm giving you a small task. I'm saying, I got a message from my programmers team that they are ready with the HTTP transport layer. So what I want, I'll tell you in the manner of output. I want you not to use now the test layer, mock layer, or whatever layer. I want this dependency as a HTTP layer. I'll repeat my question. It's a very easy question to answer. I said, I want to shift from test layer to HTTP layer. Means what? We are changing the nature of the dependency, or they call it as a flavor, like ice cream flavors, the flavor of a dependency. So in that case, can you tell me when the nature of the dependency changes, which class is going to get affected? Where are you going to make the changes? Tell me the name of the class will change. ATM implementation class. So of course, the line number 6. But that's not the point that I'll come to in a minute. So tell me, when the nature of the dependency changing from test to HTTP, is it affecting the dependent object? Yes or no? 100% yes. So what kind of a coupling will you call this? Is it a tight coupling or is it a loose coupling? 100% tight coupling. Are you getting a feel of it? Now, so let us improvise. Here, everyone told me correctly, the line to change is 6. But can I make these changes lesser? Can I reduce the degree of coupling? You know, lesser. Answer, what I'm trying to say is, can I have the control shift O, when you say import dependency to transport, can I have the interface reference pointing to implementation class? 100% yes. So if you use this approach, What is it I'll have to change? When I go from test to HTTP, LHS, RHS, both or neither. This is a revision of core Java, of course RHS. So this is why I said I'm reducing the degree of coupling. Okay, but still this has to change. So just say HTTP transport. You know that interface reference point can point to any implementation class. And run the stuff, guys, and check that now dependent object, your ATM is using which layer for informing the back? HTTP transport layer. Getting the statement so far? So what is it we are having so far? Tight coupling or loose coupling? Meaning when the nature of the dependency changing, is it affecting the dependent object 100%? Are you finally getting the concept of tight versus loose? I mean, loose coupling you have yet to see. Okay. So guys, open the dependent object and I am saying, listen to the statement I'm making. I can make this tight coupling go away, that is disappear, even before I enter Spring. So we are finally entering Spring, no doubt about it. But the point is, can I do it without Spring? Answer is yes. So do the changes with me. Tell me. Now, is my dependent object tightly coupled with any particular dependency or not really? Answer is no. Because there is nothing which is specific to binding it to a particular implementation class. But now at least give me the answer. If I run it again, what will you get? Null pointer exception or the output? Of course, null pointer exception. So this is only partly done. This is completely. There is no specific dependency here. Okay. So we have got a loose coupling here. But if I run it as it is, everyone should know that we are back to null pointer. So can anyone suggest a mechanism? Mechanism is too heavy word. Can you give me a way out? Can you suggest something where I don't have to compromise the loose coupling, plus I don't get a null pointer? Suggest. Is there any way? Spring way is the later way. But I'm saying before Spring, can you suggest something which can make this loose coupling plus no null pointer? Yes, tell me. I'm waiting. It is very much possible. You just have to think about it. You understood the question or are you not clear with the question? I'll repeat the question for everyone's sake. I said, am I allowing you to change this line? Answer is no. Because the moment you change it to my transport equal to new test transport or new soap transport, we are doomed, as in tight coupling. So you can't change. And I don't, okay, let me say this. You give me some suggestion which will work, which will not give me null pointer, point one, and which will not have any dependency specific code. Yes, guys, I also get this. Switch casing, no. Switch casing will again hard code it. Parameterized constructor. Yash is right. So think about it, guys. Instead of having a default constructor, or I can say in addition to default constructor, let this, there can be a parameterized constructor. So Yash, tell me, what will be the argument you would like to pass here since you suggested it? Yes, please. What would be the argument here? Quickly. It's your suggestion. Of course, transport T. Very good. So here, change. So transport. Okay. And tell me the next line, guys. So this is the argumented constructor. I mean, parameterized constructor. And what should I write in line number 11? Anyone? Simple question, simple answer. Yes. Inheritance. Where is inheritance coming from? So you are totally wrong if you're thinking in inheritance. There's no inheritance here whatsoever. So here you can say this dot my transport, or you can say simply my transport equal to 3. You got it? So now tell me, is there any line of a code which is talking about a specific, what do you say, dependency? Tell me quickly instead of, what do you say, diverting into something else. There's nothing. But if I run it as it is, you will get a compiler error. So now tell me, how will you solve this line number 9? There's a compiler error here. So how will you solve it? Quickly. There's no matching default constructor. So what is it you'll have to do here? Agreed that now dependent object is, free of dependency. But here you will have to create, a tester will have to create the dependency and inject it. So for example, new, if I want a soap layer, soap transport, and then 100% it will work. So just check it out and it will use the dependency. I mean, it will transfer the information to the bag using the soap layer. Understood the basic code, two-liner? Yes or no? Okay. So now if I ask you, I want to go back to my HTTP. SOAP is a layer above HTTP, which is a little heavyweight. So I want to go back to HTTP. Will your dependent object get affected? Will I have to make any changes in dependent object? No. So have we achieved the loose coupling between the dependent and dependency? Yes or no? Answer is yes. But guys, still, who has to create the dependency? Programmer. This is your dependency creation, programmer. Who has to create the dependent object? Us, programmer. And who has to supply this? Who has to do the dependency injection, as in wiring? Wiring means collaboration. Connecting the dependencies, making them available to dependent objects is all programmer. So if I say here, for example, HTTP transport, it will 100% work. So if you want to lose control, this is still what? This is an example, classic example of, it's not exactly dependent objects managing the dependencies, but a tester code is still managing it. So if you want to give up the control totally, and really, I mean, what is it? Give it to, what is it called? Spring container, a third-party container. We'll now add the configuration and we'll see how Spring takes over. Understood things so far? I'll repeat the last line again. I said, now this dependent, now there is a total loose coupling between ATM and the transport layer. But still the disadvantage of this code is, this programming model is, us as a tester, programmer has to create the dependent object, has to create the dependency and do the wiring. So if you want to delegate everything to the third party, enter Spring. Understood the background? Understood the need of it? Okay. So now more diagrams and then the steps. So here is the most important diagram. Open D12 data, D12 help, Spring help, and diagrams. Keep one folder open here. So this is what is heart of, I mean, this is what you understand it as, this thing. This is what will give you the idea about first look at Spring container. So take a look at this and we'll see. This is your Spring container, which we are going to configure shortly. Okay, so what is a Spring container? Like I used to say web container a couple of days before. Is Spring container a magician who understands things automatically? It doesn't. So you have to give the inputs. So what is one input you will require is you will have to supply the Java classes. So those Java classes or later objects which are going to be managed by the Spring container are nothing but called as Spring Beans. So guys, open the code. You have to do the parallel thing. Concept, code and understanding has to be all together. You can't just learn one at a time. So if you I'm just doing Control-Shift-W. So here your dependency and dependent beans, Java classes are already there. Are you understanding what I'm saying? So here you have got dependency, you got dependents. So which out of them are the actual Spring Beans or other actual Java objects which will be managed? Interface is not, cannot be instantiated. So leave the interfaces aside. And here HTTP transport, these are your dependency beans and this is your dependent bean. Tester is not going to be managed by Spring Container. So let me ask you again, sorry. Let me ask you again, what are these inputs? What are these inputs which we are going to give to the Spring Container? Tell me. As not Pojo exactly, but yeah, Java, Spring Bean classes. Yeah, which classes I'm talking about, Ragini? Dependents and dependency. Means what? ATM implementation and the transport beans. Okay, so test, transport, HTTP and all, this is what we'll give. But as you saw a minute ago, we had to write a tester, and in tester, we had to create the following. We had to create the beans, dependent and dependency. We had to wire them, and I mean, there was no life cycle, but this is what we had to do. So do we want to keep the control of dependencies with us? Never. So involve the Spring Container. But because I said, okay, so sorry. So one input is the Spring Bean classes, that is Java classes, and other input is the metadata information. So this metadata information can come in different flavors, different formats. So first day or maybe tomorrow also, yeah. So today, tomorrow, no Spring Boot. So here we will learn it the XML way. I hope you remember XML is much clearer, much simpler for understanding. And once you understand internals, we will replace the, okay, the first approach is full XML, today full XML. Then towards the end of the day, I hope I'll be able to show you some annotations. And later when we enter Spring Boot, you will see zero XML, all annotations and something called as Java configuration classes. So one thing at a time. So let me ask you, let me say this to you. Spring Beans, dependent and dependency. And we are going to write in a couple of minutes XML configuration file. I'll give you an analogy. Like how for web container, where do you add the instructions meant for web container? Give me the name of the configuration file for web container. Of course, web.xml. So likewise, we will create the Spring Bean configuration XML file. And once you give these two inputs, which inputs? Spring Beans and the instructions, then what is it your container is going to manage? Container is going to create the beans, do the wiring, and later you will see the full Spring Bean lifecycle completely managed by the container. So as a final result, what will you get? You will get ready-made dependent beans, dependencies injected in the dependent beans, and ready to use application, meaning your beans will be all business logic or client ready. So all you have to call is the business logic methods or your request handling methods or whatever methods. You don't have to worry about creation, wiring, and the lifecycle management. So since it is little theoretical, it takes time to reach the concept. But what is it we have already supplied in this picture? Spring Beans. What is the next step you think we are going to do? There are 3 steps for bootstrapping Spring. So first step is provide the Spring Beans. What is the next step? Configuration file. And the third step is you have to launch the Spring container. So that is where you will learn the Spring API. So a quick question. Has everyone extracted Spring docs? Have you extracted Spring API docs and kept it? Because you are going to require, today you will not require Hibernate. In the lab session, yes, because I'm going to take you further in the lab session, but in the theory session, you won't. Okay, so keep it all handy. You will require it soon. Okay, so now what we are doing is, we are going to give the XML based configuration, XML based instruction. So that's why I start the Maven nowadays very early. So anyone wants to tell me, where should I create this XML file? Under src main Java or src main resources? We have not yet entered testing. So I'm giving you two options. Java J resources are, of course, resources. Okay. So till I take you to Spring Boot, you will still have a lot of XML content. Start with me. That is why I wanted everyone to try this. Right click on resources. We are going to generate using this is why I had asked you long way back to install STS. STS is Spring Tool Suite, nothing but a Spring IDE on Eclipse. Okay, similar you have IntelliJ and all that. Okay, anyway, say new. And can you see this option? Is everyone seeing this option? Spring Bean configuration file. This is what we are going to create. It's like a instruction manual for your Spring container. Found the option or did not find the option? Quickly. Some answer, guys. Or is it a lag time? Let me see what you're saying. Found it? Okay, okay. I was not sure. Okay, so right click on this, say new, and choose Spring Bean configuration file. Do not do things ahead of time because if you know this already, okay, go ahead. But otherwise, wait. Now the next question. See, select the location and give the name. So location I have already selected, SRC main resources. File name can be anything, ABC. But since it is a bean configuration, typically I give it as beanconfig.xml. No need to add the extension. And can you see this checkbox? Add Spring project nature if required. Of course, we want it. Don't uncheck it. Give the name. Bean configuration XML given the name or not? It's just a name. Bean-config. Or you can say config.xml. Doesn't matter. Next it. Are you seeing all these checkboxes? Or is this empty? You have to see. Because other, if it is empty, that means your Maven dependencies are not downloaded correctly. All these are nothing but those XML schema based definition XSD files, which are part of those jars. So to start with, which is the only XML file or not XML, XSD you are going to require is the second one, beans. All we are going to create is Spring Bean. So check the second checkbox, which says beans. AOP, the controller, whatever, other schemas later. Have you selected this? Don't select any option. The latest one will be chosen automatically. Done? I can't go back after I say finish or next. Till I say finish, I can go back. Now next it. This will be all empty because we have not configured a single Spring Bean. We have just written the Spring Bean classes, but we have not given any configuration instructions here. So let this be empty and finish. Can I say finish? Is everyone with me? Okay, so here say finish. And you will see like how web container was reading the instructions from web.xml. So your Spring containers instruction, we will supply in bean configuration file. Is it this any special name or can it be replaced by ABC, XYZ, anything? Answer is any name. Got it so far? Is the file generated? Tell me yes or no. Okay. So now here add a comment. Everyone knows how to add a comment. Exclamation mark, hyphen, hyphen. What we are going to start with is the bean configuration. Okay. So like how in web.xml, there were session configuration tags, servlet deployment tags and all that. Here we are going to have add the comment bean configuration tags. So this is where your JSP Java Bean understanding helps you. I told you long back, they have not mentioned Java Bean in your contents at all, which is like a laughable thing because without Java Beans you can't have a MVC, and without Java Beans you can't understand Spring Beans. So let us take your test. If JSP wants to create the instance of the Java Bean without writing a scriptlet, which is the tag you have learned. JSP standard action, which action? Give me the name. Of course, use bean. Use bean is the name. So what we used to do is JSP colon use bean, we used to do there. Here it is a bean tag. Start. This whole thing is full auto intelligence, so you don't have to really remember anything. So just say bean, and here defines a single usually named bean. That is what we are using. Okay. And here I'm going to start with dependency beans first. And then we will talk about dependent bean. So you can close this since there won't be any child tag for this. Okay. Anyone remembers which were the three attributes? Okay. Which were the mandatory attributes of JSP colon use bean? I'm trying to relate to what you know already. That is how you learn. Yes, please. ID and a class. Very right. So, no, property is the wrong answer. ID and a class. If you don't supply the scope, which was the default scope? Page scope. Everyone understands? So here also, the same attributes, ID, which is nothing but a unique bean ID. So we are configuring here your first dependency, let's say test transport. So I'm calling it as a test. You can call it as ABC. And you have a class. And the best thing I always tell beginners, why I insist on STS, because it is coming from Pivotal. It is meant for Spring development. So in the lab time, in your revision time, in your self-study kind of time, definitely read this. The fully qualified name of the beans class. Isn't it same as JSP colon use bean ID and a class? I'm telling you, it is the same. You'll soon agree with me. And now I want to configure the test bean. So you say just dependence, DEP and control space, dependency dot, and you can say test transport. So this is your same JSP colon use bean renamed as bean tag. So which are the two attributes? Bean ID and a bean class. What was the scope, default scope in our JSP Java bean scenario? Paid scope. But here the default scope is singleton. Okay. So that is where we start getting into, things. And here you can see what are the four different values a Spring Bean can have. The default value is singleton. The other value which you can have in a core Java plus Spring is prototype. So today we'll have only singleton or prototype. But when we connect this to Spring Web Application, Web MVC, you can have later request and session scope also. So even if you don't add, the scope is singleton, and just take a cursor. Guys, the best thing I advertise about STS is this such a great help. Even if you don't understand a word of what I'm saying, which I hope will not happen, you have the full backup plan. So read this. The scope of this bean, singleton means how many instances your Spring container is going to create? One or multiple? Simple question. One single instance. So read that. One shared instance which will be returned by all the calls to getBean. You don't know the getBean method. GetBean is the method of a Spring API, Spring Container API, to get the ready-made bean instance. So let me ask you, if I make a demand to the Spring container, there's a method getBean. By calling getBean 100 times, will it return me 100 different bean instances, or will it return me the same bean instance? Simple question. I've been preparing you all our advanced Java for this. Of course, single. And do I have to mention this scope equal to singleton? Of course not. The default scope itself is singleton. Are we understanding this? There is a write-up here, which I'll share with you later. So here, read this. So which is the tag we are configuring? We are configuring the bean tag. Read this much. Slowly. So tell me, which are the bean tags mandatory attributes here also? Give me the name of the mandatory attributes for Spring Bean: configuration, ID, and class. If you don't supply scope, what is the value of a default scope? S or P, singleton or prototype? Singleton. Which are the two scope values which are available with a non-web, that is standalone desktop-based Java SE application? Only singleton or prototype. Which other ones you will get in a web application? In addition to singleton prototype, you'll also get a request or session. Okay. Now, the moment you create it, the moment you don't mention, if you don't mention the scope, default scope is singleton. Means what? SC is, now Spring Container will create or will share the single bean instance for between multiple requests, multiple demands. And how do we make a demand to the container? You will see the API little later. Spring application context will have an application context, the Spring environment, Spring container dot get bean. So all of it will return me the same bean instance. 180 degrees opposite, the different one is when you say prototype, prototype beans are created one per demand. So let me ask you, this thing, what is it called? If I make the 10 demands, if I say a Spring container dot get bean 10 times for a prototype, will I get the same bean instance or 10 different bean instances? 10 different. Does it remind you of something you have learned earlier recently? Does this conversation, don't just say yes, tell me what. The answer should be what? Yes, not open connection, Dhananjay, open session. Isn't it the same way? Open session versus get current session. So if you say session factory dot open session 10 times, how many session objects will you get? 10 different session objects or the same shared one? 10 different ones. Whereas if you say, what is it? Session factory dot get current session 10 times, what will you get? The same singleton object. So guys, same. It was in Hibernate. Now it is, I'm talking in Spring. Another way. Web container, everyone knows, manages the full servlet lifecycle. So web container uses the singleton type of approach for servlet or a prototype type of approach. What is the thing you can say about servlet? A singleton. Are you understanding? Everyone knows the servlet lifecycle, I hope, inside out. So anytime, whether there's a first request or loaded on startup, only one singleton instance of the servlet, which is what is equivalent to your singleton scope. Guys, start connecting the topics, start relating the technologies, and your learning becomes so interesting, so easy. Okay, so coming back to the point, let me not get derailed. So this was your one thing, and I'm telling you, okay, ahead of time, you are going to use in all practical Spring applications, Spring Boot applications in your projects also, all singletons. Why and all later. So now just quickly make the copies, or okay, you can write it. You can finish it. Give me all three beans, HTTP, SOAP, and test. Let's create all of them currently singleton. Let me make you understand one type of a bean life cycle, and then we'll make the changes. Okay. So here, ID is equal to HTTP maybe. Class dependency dot control space everything. I'm finishing and configure the third one. Guys, just give me a half a minute, please. I'm so sorry for this. I'm so sorry. So I hope you have continued without me. So add the bean tag here. So maybe dependency dot, what is it? So okay, tell me guys, have you written this much? Have you understood this much? 3 lines? Okay, so now obvious questions, but still important ones. Who do you think is going to read all these instructions? P or SC, programmer or Spring container? Spring container. When when we launch, when you bootstrap, when you start the Spring container, how to start a Spring container? In 10 minutes you will know. But whenever you start, whenever you launch the Spring container is your slave. So it is going to follow your instructions. So now let me ask you. Here, this is the first line. It is going to parse the what? The XML file in a sequential manner, line by line manner. So when it processes this line, you know what it does? It will check the scope. So tell me, what is the scope here? Singleton or prototype? The moment you don't supply, it is the singleton scope. And now, along with the singleton scope, there is a initialization policy. So tell me, I'm always connecting it to web container and servlet. That is the reason I spend so much time on servlet. Tell me, what is the web containers policy for servlet? The default policy, lazy or eager? Web container, servlets loading policy, default, lazy. But here it is opposite. So read the next attribute here. And I hope you will be able to connect it to your servlets very, very easily. Read that. So there is a additional, what is it called? Attribute called as lazy init. The name itself, this is not my short form. The name of the attribute is lazy init. So tell me, what is it? Boolean? Of course, yes. And the default value of lazy init is false. Lazy false means what? Eager. So who will start the life cycle of a Spring Bean? Simple questions I'm asking. First day, Spring container. But when after the client or one per demand, after client sends the request or right at the Spring container starting time, right at the container starting time. And if you don't specify the scope, it's a singleton scope. So how many instances will be created right at the power on, right at the container startup is one single instance. This is the information you start getting. Okay. So here, now the important question. Listen to the question. This is how we are going to spend the whole day. I mean, partly this way in lab and partly in your web hibernate. Anyway, so here, listen to the question. When the container processes this instruction, is it going to start this test bean life cycle or is it going to wait? Start or wait? Start. So I'll rephrase my question. When it looks at this tag, tell me, will this tag be executed? I mean, will it result into starting of this thing, what do you say, life cycle, or will it be skipped? Answer is it will be executed. It won't be skipped. And how many instances will be created in Java heap of a test bean? One single instance loaded eagerly at startup. So now I'm fast forwarding and I'm asking you, after these 3 lines are executed, how many beans, how many Java objects will you expect to see in the heap? Count and tell me. Answer is 3. 100% clear? Okay, that is the level of clarity you need to survive the interviews or to survive whatever, to survive your project creation and all. So dependency beans done, configured. So now, okay, and like I said, here we are giving the instructions using XML. Wait for the rest of the day to, complete and you will see all annotations. So this is only for your understanding. Now, which is the other type of a bean we have to configure? Of course, the dependent bean. Later, I'm going to swap the sequence. I'm going to say, I'm going to first discuss, put the dependent bean, and we'll see how smart or dumb your container is. All that in good time. So here, a bean, and if I say this, and I'll you can also understand this much. So ID, some name, I'm calling it as my ATM, for example, a class, which class naturally dependent dot ATM implementation. There's a problem here, but anyway, we'll see the problem and fix it. Of course, there will be a red line and all that. So have you added the dependent bean here? Okay. Now just take the cursor here. Is it telling you much? I don't know. Is this going to really tell you anything? Okay, it is telling you. Yes, read the error and tell me what is the mistake or what is it cribbing. Read that. Take the cursor over the red cross and tell me the problem. Don't read the problem. Tell me the problem. It's not a difficult thing at all. Yes, missing default constructor. Okay, so here, go back. Go back to your, what is it called? Dependent. And here, let us take a little step back. So what is causing the problem? This parameterized constructor. So guys, little later you will understand. Yash, I think he suggested, very, very right answer. This is nothing but the example of constructor-based DI, constructor-based dependency injection. But since it is giving me a problem, let's make some changes. You know what I'm talking about. Remove this. So when you save this, you will see that bean configuration XML file errors gone. But now understand something. If you run the code in this manner, 100% we are back to null pointer. Agreeing or not agreeing, understanding or not understanding. Of course. So here, first approach I generally show to the beginner is setter-based dependency injection. Setter-based DI. So let me ask you, which is the dependency here? ATM implementation is dependent on which dependency? A transport layer dependency. Agreeing, understanding? So now come here and let us create a setter-based. The term is dependency injection, making the dependencies available to dependent objects via a setter. And don't type it out. You might make spelling mistakes, whatever. So don't generate the getter. There is no concept of getter-based DI. Here, your container is going to call this method and provide you with dependency. So you will see shortly, there are 3 flavors of dependency injection. Setter-based DI. Whenever you write that argumented constructor, parameterized constructor, it is called constructor-based DI. And there's a third one called as factory method-based DI. So you'll understand factory method pattern and all over the day. So choose the setter, please. And here, give a SOP. Otherwise, you'll never know. In set transport. And here, that's why I gave you the basic code. And I wanted everyone to participate because we are like writing a couple of lines. And here you display my transport. I'll say this dot my transport. Oh, no, that will be still null. I'll simply say my transport. So we are injecting this. So guess smartly. Who is going to call this setter? P or WC? Programmer or, programmer or Spring container. I'm so much into WC. Programmer. If you say programmer, again, it is a tight coupling. You are bothered, not tight coupling exactly, but you are required to call this. This is going to be called automatically by the container. That is the whole business of dependency injection. Okay, so it doesn't matter even if you give me a wrong answer. We'll see this. Has everyone added the simple setter? I don't have to share any code more than what I've shared. It's just a 1-liner, 2-liner types. Okay, so now come back here and think and answer. Listen to the question. What does it have configured here? Dependent or dependency, NT or CY. I'm just making your spellings. I mean, so this dependency. What is it I have configured here? Dependent bean. So let me ask you, when the control comes here, when the Spring container parses this particular line, what is the default scope and what is the default initialization policy? Two answers I want, scope and value of lazy in it. So it is singleton and eager. Singleton and lazy is wrong. Singleton and eager. The value of lazy in it is false. Lazy equal to false is equal to eager. So what is the combination we are having? For all four beans, singleton and eager. And trust me on this, guys, all our beans, you remember I showed you the complete ladder, controllers, service, repository are all going to be singleton and eager. So the maximum time we will spend in understanding the singleton and eager. So I have a same question. When this particular file is parsed, how many beans would be created in the Java heap? Everyone gets it? Very right. Now the deeper, not deeper, but okay, the next question. If I write only this much, do you think there will be any wiring? Has any dependency injection taken place so far? Is the wiring done? No wiring. In short, is there any link established between dependent and dependency? 100% not. So again, let me take the reference of your JSP Java bean. So client submits the form, let's say a login form, easy. I'm talking in web programming, JSP Java bean. So client submits, I mean, the request has email and password. So how will JSP pass these properties, pass these request parameters to Java bean, which was the standard action we had used, JSP colon set property. So like how we had used JSP colon set property, here we have a property tag. So before I write the property tag, let me ask you a simple question. If I continue in this manner and if I start the Spring container, of course it will create the dependency beans, it will create a dependent bean, but there is no linking yet. They are independent entities. So naturally, if I run the application, what will I get? Null pointer or no exception? Of course, you'll get null pointer. Can you tell me? I'll give you the, because guys, these are ultra important statements or whatever. Can you tell me which lines will give you null pointer exception? I want the line number. In my code, I don't know which lines in your code you have. Give me the line number where the null pointer exception will be raised. Let's see. I want two line numbers. 34. 34 is a wrong answer totally, first of all. 20, 19 and 28, let's see. Yes, guys, absolutely right. Here, the dependency injection has not taken place. Nobody has called. You have not told your slave, the latest slave, that call this setter. Are you getting it? So the value of my transport is null. So 100% you are right. I mean, whoever said this, 19 or 28, right? Both these lines will incur this. So now finally, let us run the tag equivalent to JSP colon set property. There is a property tag, but this is a nested tag, child tag. So see what I'm doing. I'm removing this and I'm closing it separately. You know, what is it? JSX fragments, you know, fragment tags and all that same. So it's a bean tag. So here, sorry. So we are not doing this. And here you have a, let's first add the comment. The first example I always take for beginners, freshers is the setter based DI. So what is the setter based dependency injection? You write the setter and leave the invocation to the container. But container needs the explicit instructions, at least in the beginning days. So here is your property tag. So this is 100% equivalent to your JSP colon set property. Only thing is property is not equal to star. So here you have to supply the name of the property. So here just control space it. And anyone wants to tell me how come it has understood my transport? How come your IDE has understood it? Are you understanding the question? I said on intelligence, how does it understand? ID, wrong, all wrong. Here, it applies a beautiful concept called as reflection, the Java reflection, which I have not yet taken. So here, it just checks, are there any setters in the bean? What is the answer? Is there any setter we have created in the bean? Yes or no? Yes. And here it performs reverse engineering, which is called as generated property. So when it sees the setter, what it will do? It will remove the set keyword. Okay, it will lowercase the first letter and that it treats it as a property. I've given you a loads of practice of this in beans. I take Java beans for you understanding Spring Beans. So here, that is how the this is called as the derived bean property name. So let me say this again. When you say the name as my transport, now the reverse way, which setter it will end up calling? Set my transport with M lowercase or uppercase now. Set my transport may M will be what? Of course, uppercase. But guys, here you have not supplied any value. Are you understanding? Just providing a name is useless. So there are two options. One is value or the other option is ref. So tell me, what is it you are injecting here? Is it a primitive type property such as value or is it a dependency bean ka reference? It is the reference, right? So here you have another attribute. You can say control space. Here you have a ref or you have a value. You are not injecting any hard-coded or fixed value. So a ref. And then if you say control space again here, it gives you that, okay, these are the objects which are there. So which one you want to inject? So let's say I want to play with a mock layer, test layer, and you don't require any nested tags. So you can say close here. I'm telling you, we are approaching a break in another 10 minutes, but even after break, please join me in the parallel coding. The whole day, I'm going to ask you to make very little changes. And when you see the output, the first revision of the basics of foundation of Spring will be done here. And the next revision you can perform on your own in the lab or with our help. Okay, so here is the question. Listen to the question. When your container, Spring container, processes this instruction, first question, it will check the scope. Give me a fast answer. What is the scope here? What is the default scope? Singleton. What is the default value of lazy in it? True or false? False. Lazy false means eager. So my question is, when the container sees this tag, will this be executed right at the startup or will it wait for the demand coming from the client? Right at the startup. You got this? And how many bean instances will create? Single or multiple? Of course, a single one. So it will create the ATM implementation bean instance using the default constructor. You remember when we had a parameterized constructor, it wasn't happening. And now, obvious question. When it processes the line 13, what will it call from the bean class? Constructor, setter, getter, business logic. Same statements I had made couple of days in a Java bean. Of course, a matching setter. Are you understanding? Are you relating it to the web container, Java bean, and the JSP part? That is why the efforts were taken earlier to make you Spring ready. Anyway, so tell me, what will Spring container call? Spring container is not a magician. The moment it is property, property is nothing but a setter-based dependency injection. So container will see, I don't have to give any bean ID because it's a child tag. So of course it is going to say my ATM dot. Now it will add that set my transport, and which value will be injected here, which reference will be injected here is the tester. So this is where, okay, so which line, okay, tell me the line number where, listen to the question, where the dependencies are getting created. Can you tell me the line numbers here where the dependency is going to get created? Exactly. Can you tell me the line number where the dependent bean is getting created? Very right. And tell me the line number where the actual wiring, the dependency injection is taking place. 13. And all will be automatically done by the container. Understood the complete bean tag and the property setter tag? Okay. So now the next 5-10 minutes, we will write the, what is it called? How to start a Spring container. On the first day of Hibernate, I showed you bootstrapping of Hibernate, which involved creation of a session factory instance, which we had written in a static initializer block. And when we created a configuration.configure, entire instructions were loaded. Hibernate configuration XML file was loaded. Likewise, let me show you Spring instruction. I mean, starting the Spring container. So that is the reason I had told you to keep the Java docs ready. So I hope everyone's Java docs is ready. I'm talking about Spring API docs. You open the thing. You should see here. You should reach here. Everyone reached here. If not, you can do it in the breaks, and keep it ready for the next break. I mean, after break session, post break session. So now, when I discussed on the first day a servlet, we started with that, whole API. You have a servlet interface, generic servlet, HTTP servlet, which you extend. So likewise, I'm giving you now the APIs which are related with the Spring container. There is already a shortcut, whatever, summary picture. So you can use this. I have given you. So don't ask for me that give me this picture. I've given it in day 12 help, Spring help, and Spring diagrams or diagrams. So what is the starting point? Where does everything start? So okay, understand the point. We want to bootstrap. We want to start the Spring container. So the Spring container's job is to give us ready-made Spring beans. So its role is a supplier. So tell me, what was the role of a session factory all these days? Everyone knows the answer. I'm just trying to relate to it. I'm just trying to, give you the parallel things. What is the role of a session factory, guys? Quick question. Of course, to provide you with a session, open session, get current session. Likewise, what would be the job of your bean factory, which is nothing but a Spring container, provider of ready to use Spring beans. So you'll see after the break, those Spring beans will be located, loaded, instantiated. I hope you remember all these words from servlet lifecycle. They would be dependency injected and also initialized. Exactly like your servlet lifecycle. Only thing is, servlet lifecycle was being managed by whom? Web container. Who is going to manage the Spring Bean lifecycle? A Spring container. Okay, so that same it is. So coming back to the point, please look up here for this thing, Bean Factory. Search for Control F, Bean Factory. But Bean Factory is such a regular term. So you can look for abstract Bean Factory. It's a class. And then you can reach easily a Bean Factory. So let us take a pause here and let me ask you a question. What was the starting? What were the package names in Hibernate? org.hibernate. So you had org.hibernate.configuration and CFG and all that, and annotations and all that. So here, all the packaging starts with OS. Every time I'm not going to say org.spring framework. It is too much. And wait for Spring Boot, and Spring Boot like me, or I like Spring Boot. I mean, like in this is like how the Spring Boot follows, they also follow the whole short forms. So here OS, when I say OS, as long as we are in Spring, it means org.spring framework. So there's a sub package beans and a factory. And here, this is where the root interface for starting the Spring Bean container. So like how our whole servlet API started with a servlet interface. So what is the starting point of a Spring container API? Bean factory. Is it an interface or is it a class? It is an interface. The moment you read the Word bean factory. Can anyone tell me what must be the role of a bean factory? Already I have said. I just want to hear it from you once again. Session factory was the provider of session. So this will be the provider of Spring Beans. Okay, nothing but it is an interface to reach the Spring container. Its role is to provide ready to use Spring Beans, which are already instantiated, dependency injected, etc. Initialized also. But the problem with this is, guys, this bean factory is good for core Java, but finally we are going to add it in the web application. So it doesn't support internationalization. It doesn't support a lot of features which you require in your typical enterprise application. So there is a sub interface. So this is a super interface, which is the sub interface you are looking at, application context. So for all practical purposes, today we are going to use this particular interface. See the word. Does it remind you of something called a servlet context? You remember servlet context? Servlet context was an interface which represents the entire web application. It represented your interface with your web container. Likewise, application context is the interface to represent your Spring container. Okay, but you know that. Okay, so I'll just say this. So application context is our starting point. So today we are in core Java. So I'll show you one implementation class. Tomorrow when we integrate it with web Java or web MVC or whatever, we'll see there is a sub interface called as web application context, and that path we will what do you say, trace tomorrow. So now come to today's thing. Application context interface is implemented by so many classes. So look at something called as class path XML application context. Guys, remember in the short forms, OSCS, ORG Spring Framework Context Support. OS is all the time ORG Spring Framework, and CS is context support, not your computer science. And you can see that it is auto-closable. So, you know, I can open it in a try with resources and pay special attention to this name. I agree the names are huge, long, but they are self-explanatory. So what is the meaning of it? When you instantiate this class, I'll show you the constructor in a minute. What is it we are telling the Spring container is build the application context is equal to start the Spring container using what? XML based instructions or annotation based instructions? Easy one. XML based instructions. And where have we created this XML file? In the runtime class path. So you are telling Spring container when you choose this particular class that Spring container is going to be created or not created, started using XML based instructions placed in runtime class path. So this is what is the meaning of that particular class. I have written it in the diagrams and all. And then you look at the constructor. There are so many constructors. We'll look at the simplest one. So this is the default one, which is kind of useless. So here we have you can look at the fourth one. So first, second, third, and fourth. So here you are going to supply a configuration location, meaning it is not a location, it's actually the configuration file name. So here it is going to start the Spring container using the information from XML file. Okay, so this is our starting point. So what we will do in the next 2 minutes is we'll create I am bootstrapping Spring for you. So we will start the container by creating the instance of this class. Have we created any bean configuration file or we haven't? We have created a bean configuration file just in a moment ago or whatever, minutes ago. And we will supply that configuration file name, not the location file name it requires. Location we have given the class path, that is src main resources. And then we will see whether any beans are getting created at all. We'll see whether Spring is giving us ready to use beans. So just 2 minutes more. Open the IDE. You can close all of it and open that tester Okay, now we don't require this test ATM. You remember the test ATM was having the constructor and all that. So if you don't want to see the errors, you can just comment it. We are not going to use this tester hereafter. No? Yeah. So I'll just remove this. Just comment it. And let us write in a minute test spring and stop there. So here, click on tester and let's create a new class here to test bootstrapping of Spring, or I'm just saying it as test Spring container. Test Spring. Reached here. Is your class path XML application context class auto closable? Very much yes. Can we open it in try with resources? 100% yes. Over time, you will see Spring also does the same thing like Hibernate, exception translation. So ideally speaking, you don't even require the checked exception, but just as the norm, I'm doing it. And here, let us create the instance of class path XML application context to start the container. Okay. So class path XML, you just say control space. It tells you standalone XML based application context. Application context is nothing but the interface which represents a Spring container. Context is equal to new. Create the instance and choose the constructor here third and tell me what should be the argument here. Nothing but the name of the configuration file. So please don't make mistakes in the spellings bean-config.xml. Otherwise, you'll start getting file not found exception. So now tell me, if I'm specifying the name right here, can it be any name or can it be, I mean, not here. So while naming the file, is there any specific naming convention? Absolutely not. Because you are supplying to this container this particular name. Only thing is match the name. And here, add a SOP, Spring container booted or Spring container started. Same thing which we did on the first day of Hibernate, bootstrapping of Hibernate. Done this much? We are stopping after this. Okay. Okay. So now I have a question. When you run this, are you going to see only this line Spring container started or more? Okay, the answer is more. What is that? So I know you will just say more. So I was worried about that. So what more? Yes. Okay, let me not trouble you. Tell me, when this line is executed, what is it we are doing is, yes, exactly. You are very right. So here, now you are instructing, you are telling the Spring container to start using the instruction from this bin configuration XML file. So guys, please don't run it and spoil the suspense. So your container is your slave. So it starts bootstrapping. It starts loading. So now tell me, what is the first thing? This tag will be executed or skipped, called or skipped? Of course, called. Why? Singleton and eager. So what is the first line of output you'll see? You remember the test transport, don't go by memory, go by understanding, please. So you remember, or rather you see, this is the SOP you will see in constructor of test transport. So this will tell you that, okay, my dependency bean is created. What will be the next line of output? HTTP constructor, SOAP constructor. So all three dependencies all done. Next one. When it comes to this line, what is the expected output, please? In ATM constructor, what else, right? And most importantly, on this line, what will be called by the container automatically? Exactly, in setter. Are you understanding it? So, last statement, the last statement before I stop for the break. Who is creating the dependencies? Programmer or Spring container? Spring container. Who is creating the dependent object? Spring container. And who is doing the most important job of DI as in wiring? Again, the Spring container. So just check it out. Where are we? Test Spring. Run this. Only run this. I've not even called the business logic method. That I will show you after the break. I've not even got any beans from the Spring. Let us see what Spring container is doing on its own. And look at the output and tell me, is the understanding fully clear? It is going to provide it in a sequential manner. So what will you call this? Dependency objects. Dependencies are getting created. What will you call this? Dependent object getting created. But the dependency injection is not yet done because we went for setter based DI. As Yash was saying, parameterized constructor, that's the next topic, constructor based DI. So you will see the dependency right there, currently not there. And who is calling this setter to inject the dependency? A Spring container. And then container says, okay, I have started. And since we are not doing anything, who will call what? The JVM will automatically call context.close. Are you understanding? Leading to Spring container shutdown, where all the beans will be marked for garbage collection. You're going to see the full life cycle exactly like servlet, having init and destroy style methods, but after the break. Understood the working of the Spring container at least 5%, 10%? The basic things. Okay, so I'll just create a zip of it in case anyone requires it and give it to you and stop right there. The 14. You just have to import it as a existing Maven project, and you don't have to change a word. You can just use it as it is. Just import it in your workspace and use it. D14 Spring Java IC. Okay, I've sent you this. Getting the error. Komal, why don't you share screen? I'll just take this question and I'll stop. Yes, this one, Komal. You can share your screen. Let's see whether I can fix it fast. Otherwise, I'll do it in the lab session. So Kunal, I'm not taking everyone's this. I'm just fixing one problem. You also pay attention. This one, guys, Kunal and everyone, I have given. This one, Komal, line number 12, you have foreclosed the tag. Line number 12 pe close kiya tag. How can you do the closing of the tag when you have nested this? Okay, save it. Control S. Property name, my transport /test. There's a warning there. So something you have not done correctly. This thing. So that was the one error. Show me that. What is it called? ATM implementation. Do you have a setter? It requires a setter. Set my transport. Transport my transport. Okay, this looks okay. Show me the bean file again. Bean configuration file again. Take me to that warning bulb. I mean, just take a cursor over there. Let me see. Reference bean test is not found. Test is not found. Just run the tester, please. Test Spring. Like there. Run the test Spring. Is it a genuine problem or oh this one? You have got it wrong. Anyway, but that will work. Anyway, try. Yeah. No, there is a problem. No such bean. No bean named test. Okay, there is a genuine problem. Show me bean configuration XML. It is not finding that test bean. Let's see. Space before test. Oh yeah, see that? Spaces, I told you guys. Thanks, Akash. Spaces can kill you. So save it. Yeah, run it again. So guys, I have given you my reference code. Please, ATM implementation nahi, test Spring. Correct. Okay, so Spring container started. So likewise, do a little bit of debugging, guys, and go ahead. Very good, Kunal. So I have given you the reference project. So check whether wherever you have made mistakes, try it. Otherwise, we are there in the lab session to help you. See you around at, okay, so it is, yeah, so 11:15 we will be, we'll resume again at 11:15. See you around. You're most welcome, Komal.